Hi, good afternoon, everyone joining us today. I'm Dr. Mena Demisay with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. I am the Vice President of Policy Analysis and Research, and we are so excited to have you all join us today to talk about some very critical issues as it relates to the U.S. Census and the Black community. You are actually joining us for the first of what will be a 6-part virtual town hall series with the CBCF that aims to provide critical policy updates on the most pressing concerns and issues facing the Black community in the era of COVID-19. Our brain trusts will happen every 2 weeks through the first week of June, and we'll have some updates for you at the end of the hour. I'm delighted to have Congressman Horsford with us today, who is the CBC Census Task Force for the Congressional Black Caucus. He is a member of the United States House of Representatives representing the great state of Nevada. We are also joined by Dr. Janine Abrams Mclean, no stranger to those of you on the front lines of getting census turnout for hard to count communities. She's the Vice President of Fair Count, and it will be here to talk to us about the latest work and effort around our collective action to ensure that our communities are counted. We are also joined by Naomi Smith, our very own research policy analyst, who worked with us in our partnership with Fair Count around some maps that we will show you identifying the disproportionate effects of non-response rates as it relates to the Black and Hispanic community, what dollars are at stake, and how you can learn to be active and join us in our efforts today. And last but not least, we're joined by Mr. Albert E. Fontenot Jr., the Associate Director for the Decennial Census Programs at the United States Census Bureau. So he will give us an update as far as what the census is doing related to policies and priorities in the midst of COVID-19. I'm your moderator for this hour. We will save our last 10 minutes for questions from you all, so please get your questions ready. We'll take them from the chat box. I wanna make a couple of brief comments. First, we are launching our Black America Counts initiative, which is our partnership with Fair Count that targets census maps to help guide outreach and mobilization efforts. There are, as you know, trillions of dollars at stake as it relates to federal programs, reapportionment, redistricting. And so our goal today is to make you more informed, more motivated to do something about it, and join our efforts. We have a great lineup of speakers, as I mentioned. I also want to make sure I give a shout out to the young people who helped make this initiative happen. Folks like Cece Huddleston, an undergraduate who recently graduated from the University of Michigan. She was our CBCF intern who worked with Janine and Naomi and I since last September to collect over 30,000 data points of socioeconomic and demographic data, which you will see revealed in these maps. And of course, we all are aware of the Unity Campaign. Many organizations, people like Melanie Campbell at the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation, Jerry Green, National Urban League, Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. Many people, Black Lines for Just Immigration, have come together over the past year to make sure that we do the work necessary to address this issue and ensure that we're counted. And the census has started, so no better time to talk about this than now. We do have some social media hashtags. We're gonna share the screen here for you. Hashtag join us, Policy for the People, at CBCF-INC. We also have hashtag Black America Counts, the name of our initiative, as well as our hashtag I Lead, I Serve, I Count. So as you can see here, you can multiple ways to join us via social media, so please share with your respective audiences. And without further ado, I now would like to turn it over for our first speaker, Congressman Horsford, who made history, as many of you know, as Nevada's first African-American state Senate Majority Leader. He serves on the committees of the House Ways and Means, House Budget, and House Natural Resource Committee. He has been a stalwart, tremendous leader in the Congress, chairing the CBC Census Task Force. He is an ambassador for our communities in Congress on the front lines, not just for the people of Nevada, but for working families, youth, and all of you tuning in. He has been a champion for underserved communities of color and ensuring we are counted. So I would like to now turn it over to Congressman Horsford, who will talk about the priority concerns and update us with the task force efforts. Congressman Horsford.
Thank you, Dr. Demasi, and all of your hard work on behalf of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. I'm very excited to join with all of you. I want to commend the CBCF for your incredible work, and the young people, as you said, who were very much a part of this process. I'm also delighted to be joined by Dr. Janine Abrams Mclean from Fair Count, who has become a great friend and has helped guide our work in Nevada, as well as the Congressional Black Caucus throughout the country around the census. And also to Dr. Albert Fontenot for joining us as well from the U.S. Census Bureau. We appreciate your insight and all the work that the Census Bureau is continuing to do amidst this very difficult time during the pandemic. While most of us in the nation, our attention understandably is around our public health safety amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, there actually is one thing that every one of us can do to make sure that our communities are counted and that we receive the representation and the funding that we need, and that is to make sure that we complete the census. Earlier this month, we marked Census Day on April 1st, but because of the situation that so many Americans are faced with, many people have still not completed the census form safely or quickly. And as of this week, the Census Bureau announced that the field operations for the 2020 census will resume sometime after June 1st at the earliest due to the ongoing COVID-19 concerns. The Bureau also extended the deadline, or is proposed to extend the deadline for the public to self-respond to October 31st of this year. Last week, the rate of increase in response to the 2020 census declined and is still far below the response rate from the 2010 census during the same time in the enumeration. According to the Census Bureau, only about 48% of American households have self-responded so far. So we have a lot of work to do to keep encouraging everyone in our country to respond for the good of our children, their future, our communities, and our country. And the fortunate thing is we can do this online or by phone, eventually by mail. These are the safest ways to respond to the census, especially in our current public health crisis. Filling out the form now really does save the Bureau from having to send anyone out to conduct the census to your home in person, which is not the preferred way for the Bureau to take your census, and really in this time is the best way to keep everyone safe. An accurate count is so vital to ensuring that all of our communities are not underrepresented and to push back against those in power who spew hatred and ignorance and try to deny us our constitutionally mandated equal voice and representation. The district that I'm proud to serve in Nevada's 4th District, was actually created after the 2010 census. And I am the first African-American to serve in Nevada's 4th District, or to serve from Nevada in our federal delegation at all. And so representation really does matter. As we all know, there has been a census count every 10 years since the census was constitutionally mandated in 1790. And every single time there has been an undercount of those residing here in the United States. And the threat of the undercount has never been more severe than it is under this current administration and its attacks on communities of color. While there are those forces who want to dissuade us from voting and from participating in the census, we simply cannot let that happen. We know that communities of color, particularly Black people, are among the communities most at risk of being missed in the census. The undercount, even in the 2010 census, was over 3.7 million Black people, according to the Color of Change. And estimates for the 2020 census put that undercount at around 4 million people, according to the Urban Institute. And this is before the COVID-19 pandemic ever started. Now that means a loss of billions of dollars of federal funding. In my home state of Nevada, we receive about $6 billion every single year from information that comes from the census. And just think about it. In my state, we've grown about 300,000 people since 2010. And so that's 300,000 people that weren't adequately counted since that time for important funding to our schools, our hospitals, our transit, grants to small businesses, help for young people trying to receive funding for college. These are the programs that are funded from the federal government to our state and local communities. And we need to make sure that these dollars don't miss our communities. And make no mistake, I'm a member of the Budget Committee and the Ways and Means Committee. This money will be spent and it will be allocated. But if we're not counted, it just won't come to the Black community, and we cannot let that happen. So we need all of you to engage with your family, your friends and your coworkers, and there really is no better time than today to make this happen. We can get on the phone, we can get on social, and we can encourage people to complete their census and make sure that our communities are counted. We have a wealth of information participating today, thanks to Fair Count, that are leading on this issue in their own respective ways and in their own communities. Again, I want to thank the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation for bringing us together for this important topic. Thank you for including me, and I'll yield back to you, Doctor.
Sure. Thank you so much, Congressman. I really appreciate your leadership. With that, I want to turn now to Mr. Fontenot, the Associate Director for the Decennial Census. He provides executive leadership for 3 major programs within the Census Bureau: the 2020 Census, the ACS, American Community Survey, and the geographic programs. He has previously served as the Assistant Director for Field Operations, where he oversaw the field divisions, the 6 regional census offices, the National Processing Center, and the Office of Survey and Census Analytics. So he comes with great expertise and can provide with us an update as far as what the census is doing, particularly in this current climate, but also with regard to outreach and response rates for hard to count communities like the Black community and others. So I'd now like to turn it over to Mr. Albert Fontenot.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And I wanted to say thank you to Representative Horsford for giving a very thorough assessment of the importance of the census and what to do. When we sat down to organize and plan the 2020 census, and I was part of the team that wrote the original operating plan for the 2020 census early in the decade, our goal was to make sure we made it easy, safe, and available to everyone to respond, especially our harder to count communities. We then designed a communication program that had a goal to inform people of what the census was about, to educate them on what its value was in their community, and to motivate them to participate in the census. To talk about it for a moment, we designed 3 ways for people to respond: online, using computers and mobile devices, smartphones, and made that safe, secure, and easier than posting on their favorite social media sites. Calling toll-free to our census questionnaire response centers and having a live agent take your census information and filling out and mailing back the paper form made 3 easy ways to self-respond. But we knew that some people still weren't going to respond, and often it's people of color who do not respond on self-response. We plan and still plan to send out over 500,000 census takers to knock on doors and personally take the census. COVID-19 has impacted our timing on the personal interviewing, and I'm going to address that in a couple of seconds. But first, I want to give you a quick assessment on how the self-response efforts have been going. I know that Representative Horsford gave you some numbers, and those numbers are pretty accurate. as of yesterday, we're at 49.1% of the housing units in the country. Now, we have done an assessment based on the timing of this census and the method of this census, and the goal to be at 60.5% self-response before we start knocking on doors, and we are on track to hit that at this point in time. So far, over 72.5 million housing units have responded to the census. Online has been the major success, with 43% of the nation already using our internet application to respond to the census. 0.6% of the nation respond by phone, and 5.5% responded on paper. I would just draw your attention to the fact that we will be sending paper forms out all this month to everyone who has not yet responded to encourage them to respond to the census. Self-response provides an opportunity ongoing for everyone to respond during this period of stay-at-home orders and mandated social distancing. We're focused on maintaining the health and safety of our workforce and the public, and still conducting a complete, accurate census with a strong focus on outreach and extra efforts to enumerate hard-to-count, traditionally undercounted populations. We've adjusted the timing of our census field activities by 90 days. The critically important part of that is we've moved from a March-April activities back to a start date of sometime in June to reopen our field office and resume our operations, and that key decision enables people to continue to respond to the census until October 31st instead of the original cutoff of July 31st. We're keeping our telephone centers open, our internet self-response application available, and our paper processing centers will be receiving paper responses until October 31st. This schedule enables us to fully plan to open and reach out to people in this extended period of time. There's a detailed schedule of each one of our operations posted on our website when those operations will occur. We're working to ensure that we have census takers in every single community based on moving the non-response follow-up operations back from running May 13th through July 31st to a new schedule of August 11th through October 31st. We have already selected and offered positions to over 640,000 candidates to be census takers, but we realize based on the new schedule, some will no longer be interested. So we're planning to continue to recruit, especially to ensure that every neighborhood is covered. While we don't have an analysis of response rate by race and ethnicity done at this point, we have done an analysis of response rates in key cities that have large black populations, and it shows them lagging behind their states and behind the national response rates. To attempt to increase self-response in those areas, we've increased our media spending targeting the Black and African American audiences. Our base plan for 2020 was to spend $37.9 million compared to $28.4 million in 2010. We have so far continued to look at that, and we have increased our planned spending an additional $8.75 million for a total of $46.6 million that we're targeting to reach out to the Black and African American communities. Over the next 6 weeks alone, we're going to be spending $14.2 million specifically in markets where the largest number of Black and African Americans reside. We're analyzing the response rates in those areas on a constant basis and recalibrating our advertising focus each week. We're also expanding the number of media markets that we're going to do Black African American specific advertising from 67 to 73 major media markets. We're pursuing many new advertising tactics in light of the coronavirus, including tactics designed specifically to impact urban hard-to-count populations, such as launching out-of-home placements specifically at grocery stores, convenience stores, gas stations, and other locations where people are going even when stay-at-home orders are in place. We're implementing media placements such as flyers on pizza boxes and other carry-out dining to leverage the changing consumer behavior due to COVID-19. And we're executing media placements during musical events, at-home concerts, and things which have taken the place of live concert events. I do want to emphasize, though, that we can make it easy to respond. We can tell you it's important to respond. We can provide information on how to respond. But a key effort to making sure people respond is an effort from our partners who are the trusted voices at the national and local levels to target their own constituents, the hard-to-count community groups. Our partnership programs at the national and local levels will continue to reach out to our trusted voices in the Black community across the country. We have 59 national organizations as partners that specifically focus on African Americans, including the NAACP, the National Urban League, and many others. In community programs, we have nearly 13,000 partners focused on this audience. I'm reaching out to you to say that we are going to make sure we do everything we can as a Census Bureau, but you are the trusted voices in your community, and we depend on our partnership with you to motivate people to actually take advantage of what we made available to do the census. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that update. Very good to hear that the census is on the front lines of making some alternative options available and extending the deadline to, I believe you said October 31st. So I'm sure we'll get some more conversation going on that following our speaker's comments. Next, I'd like to move to Dr. Janine Abrams Mclean, who is the Vice President of Fair Account. She comes with over 15 years of experience designing, managing, and implementing population-based studies and projects. She's been a fantastic partner during her tenure. She also served prior to her joining Fair Account at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, where she applied her expertise in computational biology and population-based studies. I think if there's anyone ideal to be addressing this issue from sort of 2 points of expertise as we talk about COVID-19, it is her. I also want to personally thank her for her passion around this issue. She has been a partner to everyone, and certainly to the students at the University of California, Washington Center, where she trained and guided their efforts, and they went back to their respective universities organizing around the census, where they were not as passionate about it before. They've kind of taken her passion and gone with it. So she can talk to us, and as you all know, Fair Count was established by Stacey Abrams, and they are on the front lines of addressing this issue and have done some great data work, but also organizing on the ground, which she'll be able to talk to. So I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Janine Abrams Mclean.
Hi, thank you so much, Minna. It has been my pleasure, as well as the pleasure of our staff, to work with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. I'd also like to give a special thanks to Congressman Horsford, who has been an absolute wonderful partner and friend throughout all of this. And so definitely happy to continue working with him. And a special thank you to Mr. Fontenot from the Census Bureau. We've worked closely with our friends at the Census Bureau as well. So I really want to focus today on how the census and changes in light of the COVID-19 pandemic have impacted and will continue to impact the Black community. As you heard from Congressman Horsford, in 2010, around 3.8 million Black people were missed in the census, completely missed in the census. And 2.2 million young children under the age of 5 were also missed, and Black and brown children were twice as likely to be undercounted than white children. And so we know that the census, the 2020 census, will bring an estimated $1.5 trillion in federal funding to our communities across the nation. And as Congressman Horsford said, that 1.5 trillion, if we aren't counted, our communities aren't counted, the money doesn't disappear. It gets shifted to other places that have been counted. And so for the Black community, we have to make sure that we are counted. The Urban Institute estimated that 1.7 million Black people could be undercounted in this census. And when we go back to the funding that this refers to, we know that if Black people aren't undercounted based on 55 federal programs, so this isn't even all of them, there are about over 300 federal programs that are receive, the funding is directed based on census numbers. But if we look at only 55 of those programs, if that undercount of 1.7 million Black people occurs, we are looking at losing over $3 billion in federal funding to communities across the nation every year for the next 10 years. And that ranges from $450,000 if Black people aren't counted or are undercounted in Wyoming, to $390 million lost in New York if Black people are undercounted. And again, this money does not disappear. It is shifted to other communities so that we and our communities do not get their fair share. The census has been fraught with challenges. This is especially when it comes to the Black community. We know that there was underfunding for census operations. There were damages done based on the proposed citizenship question that stoked a lot of fear in communities, specifically immigrant communities. And we know that there are already disinformation campaigns. Recently, there was a campaign or messaging going around saying that you had to get your stimulus check, you had to fill out your census. And as well as bad actors putting out information last year about people knocking on your doors to case, as census workers, to case your house out so they can rob you later. And so the Census Bureau has a rumors page so that people can report misinformation and disinformation that they come across. And the Leadership Conference, which the Census Count campaign that is headed by Beth Link, they are also tracking misinformation and disinformation. So please, if you see something that looks suspicious, report it, and then also tell people to stop sharing it. The census, and then let people know that the census is safe. Other challenges that we know have been an issue is this is the first census that is being done primarily online. And we know that across the nation, there are over 20 million households that lack access to broadband internet. And so this, all of these were challenges before the pandemic hit. And Fair Count, we were doing a lot to combat those challenges. We were doing deep dive organizing in the hardest to count communities. We were putting internet installations, over 135 internet installations across the state of Georgia. And we also did almost $1 million media buy to target communities, particularly those that are traditionally undercounted, to target those communities to get them to participate in the census. And in light of all of in the midst of this pandemic, we've had to pivot and shift because there are a whole new set of challenges, but we are nimble, and Black folks are nimble and ready to meet these challenges in general. So some of the challenges that we identified, groups around the country, including Fair Count, had all kinds of events planned. We're talking, live events, large events, to on the ground organizing and outreach that had to be completely suspended. Fair Count had a 60 county bus tour that we had launched, and we only got to 6 counties before we decided that it was more important for us to protect our staff and the communities that we work in the during this pandemic. And so we canceled that. And this is something that organizations around the country have had to do. But again, organizations, the people that are working that are dedicated to making sure that we get fair and accurate counts, have pivoted. They're moving to, like you see here with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, to doing virtual events, to Fair Count, we're doing the same thing. We're doing town halls, we're doing webinars where we're talking to faith leaders and community leaders. We also have technological solutions that we're offering, particularly for faith communities. We have a program where we're offering free church management software to churches around the country to help them keep in contact with their members, as well as to continue to collect tithes and offerings that churches and mosques and all these other faith institutions need to stay afloat as everything is shut down. We have a very, I always give credit to our CEO, Rebecca DeHart, for really spearheading this initiative. Before the pandemic, she was able to work with EBT Fresh, which is a free app that is given to those who receive food stamps. And so this app, they are able to go on and to check their balances. And we have been doing A/B testing of messaging around the census on this app. And I know in Georgia, we're reaching over 75,000 people through these paid advertisements on the app. We also are doing targeted messaging focused on the Black community. We have our Black Men Count, our Black Men Count initiative that we have in partnership with the Boulay. And actually next Monday, we'll be holding a national teletown hall to focus on Black men. We did a roundtable with for our Sisters for the Census campaign, which is in partnership with the National Council of Negro Women, where we had Dr. Janetta Cole and Stacey Abrams and Mo Ivory on to talk about the impacts and the role that Black women will play in getting everyone counted in the census. And in that same line, we have partnered with Comcast to do $1 million in PSA advertisements over their networks nationwide to particularly focus on the Black community, including our Sisters for the Census campaign. And so we know that there are all of these new challenges and we're trying to meet them. Another challenge that we have is that one of the operations that was suspended that has been suspended by the Census Bureau is what's called update leave. This is where communities that are primarily in rural areas, as well as Native American reservations, actually receive hand-delivered packets. And we're looking, this is roughly covers around 6 million households around the country that have not received their information about the census at this point because field operations have been suspended. And so one of the things, look, I grew up in Wiggins, Mississippi, Stone County, and this is rural Mississippi. And we know, like, I can call people and tell them, hey, if you were in the, if you haven't received anything about the census, these are the ways that you can do it. If you have internet access, go to my2020census.gov and fill it out, even if you don't have your code. That was, if you don't have a code and if you're on the update leave, you haven't received a code at all. But you can also do it on the phone, as well as if you are able to get paper forms eventually. And so we just really want everyone to participate and to tell folks to participate. My thing is, do it yourself and then tell 38 other people that they need to do the census as well. Again, there are a lot of issues that have come up, and with the continued or the extended delay of or extension of the census until October 31st. Again, if we see this as we do have more time, and that is a good thing, that we have more time to make sure that the hardest to reach communities and the historically undercounted communities are counted. But the problems that come with that are numerous, and we have to be cognizant of those issues as now. We need to, we can win the war and making sure that everyone is win the battle and making sure that everyone is counted by extending the census. But this also impacts political power, because by extending the census, Congress has to approve whether or not we extend the delivery of the census numbers to states for the redistricting process. And that is where political lines are drawn. And the proposed extension of that is until July 31st of 2021. And so we really have to think about, how will this impact our communities? The census, if you've been involved or been on any other call about the census, the census is about money and power. I just talked about the money, and when I talk about redistricting, I'm talking about the political power, the equal and fair distribution of political power to communities that have been marginalized and disenfranchised historically. And so what we want to do is to really think about, how does this impact the long term? So win the battle and win the war. So we want to make sure that everybody participates. And then the last thing I'll talk about is going into, as we extend this until October 31st, yeah, we have time, you know, we have until October 31st, but do it now. Even though the census is extended until October 31st, you are counting those people who are in your home on or before April 1st. I don't know about you, but if I wait until October to figure out, to try and remember who was in my house, was Sharon staying with me on this day? I know that such and such was couch surfing, but it's called, I learned yesterday, it's called recall bias. And what we don't want to happen is for people in our community to not remember and just say, I can't remember what's going on, so I'm just not going to fill it out. The other thing is when the census numerators, the census takers start going to your doors, we may still be in a situation where we are practicing social distancing or social distancing practices, right? So how many of you, and this is also from a conversation that I had with a wonderful colleague yesterday, how many of you are really going to open the door for someone in a mask, right? So if you don't, again, if you don't want somebody coming and knocking on your door in the first place, and you don't want someone in a mask coming and knocking on your door, go ahead and fill out your census today. And so I'm going to stop there. I think, yes, I do. On my board, you can go to my2020census.gov to fill out your census right now. If you want to learn more about Fair Count, faircount.org. And then blackmencount.org for our Black Men Count initiative, and Sisters for the Census to engage Black women to make sure that Black families and children are counted. And again, thank you so much, Minna, for this invitation to be here, and I will stop.
Great. Thank you so much, Janine. You're full of great information, and we really appreciate the overview. Time is flying by here, and now we want to turn it over to our research policy analyst, Naomi Smith, who has been with us for quite a while at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, working vigorously on this project as our co-PI. She is going to walk us through the maps regarding our partnership with Fair Count. She has worked in the areas of minority access to capital and state of Black-owned businesses. She has worked on several different issues regarding Black women's empowerment and others, but has played a principal role in helping put these maps together, which we want you all to use and to share with your networks and people on the ground, state by state analysis. And we've got plenty of other data that we'll be rolling out. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Naomi Smith, and we'll be sharing the screen so you all can get a close-up look at our maps, and we'll walk through them for you. Naomi.
Okay. Thank you, Minna, and thank you, Dr. Janine and Congressman Horsford. I'm so excited to be on this panel with everyone to share about our interactive map. So I'm going to share my screen right now and kind of go through and show up a fact sheet which will explain the current population in each state and exactly how much money is at risk for Black and Brown communities around the nation. Okay, so if you go to www.cbcfinc.org Black America Counts, you should go to the homepage for our Black America Counts initiative. And if you go, you'll see this beautiful photo of one of our events. And if you scroll down, you'll be able to see our interactive map. The purple states are CBC member states. So if you're in a state with a CBC member, you'll be able to see your specific state information. So for example, we can go to New York. When you press the state, you'll get a small snapshot of the current population for each state. And further, you'll see the fact sheets which were created in collaboration with Fair Count, which kind of show where the hard to count communities are in each state. So we looked at many different variables, including the Black population, the Hispanic population, children under 5, and internet access to kind of determine where organizers may need to send field workers to advocate for filling out the census. New York is broken up into 6 zones, which indicate areas of hard to count communities. So also in New York, the current population is around 19 million, but specifically there are around 145,000 Black people at risk for an undercount in New York. And that translates into over $89 million. So rather than that money going to our communities, it's going to be redistributed to other areas. And if you enjoy federal funded programs, which we have some listed below, like the school breakfast program, Medicaid, Section 8 housing, or even unemployment, which many people are utilizing right now, it's very important to complete the census so that your community will receive some of this funding. And we also have partnered with other organizations, including Fair Count, like the Unity Council and the National Urban League, who also are doing great things with advocating for the census. So if you want more information, feel free to use some of these resources in the lower left-hand corner to find more information about the census. And I'd also like to point out for any community organizers that are participating on the call, the 2020 Census Toolkit takes you to the Census Community Outreach Toolkit, which can be used as a resource for those who are advocating for the census in their communities. So I'm going to return to the homepage, which if you don't know what your state looks like for any reason, we also have them listed here below. And we also are live tweeting tweets of folks that are participating on our census social media campaign. So if you're interested in being featured on our website, please feel free to use the hashtag Black America Counts, hashtag I Lead, I Serve, I Count, or hashtag Hear Me, See Me to participate. And we also have our social media toolkit, which you can use on your own social media platforms to share our information on the census. So thank you, Minna.
Thank you, Naomi. If we can go back up to the map for a moment here, and let's click on Nevada, Congressman Horsford's state, and you can kind of walk us through the different color coding of the maps. The key here, first of all, let me back up for a moment. So Fair Count has done this work already, and so we are expanding their formula across the states. And as you all know, the census has a very targeted outreach effort for severely hard to count communities where, you know, if you see the counties that are coded in red or purple, you're talking about HTC, what we'd call HTC communities where, you know, 51% or higher, you know, are at risk of being undercounted, right? And so what our value add here are the yellow shaded counties where we are essentially casting a wider net to ensure that we don't miss populations that are communities of color, 25% or higher. And I do want to ask Janine to chime in because essentially this was an effort that started with Fair Count to ensure that folks pretty much across from sort of a county specific level are able to make sure that resources are shared in these other counties that perhaps might be overlooked. So Janine, if you want to also talk about the internet, sort of household internet access and lack thereof. Thanks.
Yeah, so this was what, Fair Count, we are based in Georgia, but we do national work through our partnerships like this one with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. But when we first started in Georgia, Georgia has 159 counties. And so in order to basically do strategic planning using information from the Census Bureau and also building upon what is available at the Hard to Count map site that has been put together by Steve Romalewski's team at the City University of New York, we broke the state down into zones, very similar to the zones that you see here, and color coded them. So basically creating tiers so that we could identify the hardest to count counties in the state. The other thing that sets our maps apart is if you look at the county in zone 1 that is shaded in gray, those are counties that are not considered hard to count because they had good, really good participation they had good participation in the census in 2010. What we've done here is we've identified counties that have a combination of communities of color that are over 25%, combined with over 25% of households not having access to the internet. And the reason that we identified these counties, which we refer to as at-risk counties, is because while we're focusing on those that have been historically undercounted, we also don't want to miss out or lose any gains that we would make by ignoring communities that could be at risk now that the census is primarily online. And so in Georgia, our organizers that we have on the ground focus not only on the hard to count counties, but also on the ones that are at risk. And the last thing I'll say is that, because we really like hard to count, is a term that comes from the Census Bureau, based on communities that are traditionally undercounted. We don't really like that term because it implies that there's something inherently wrong with the communities in these areas that makes them hard to count. So when we talk about Black people being hard to count, immigrants being hard to count, young children being hard to count, there's nothing inherently wrong with those groups. The systems that are in place don't count them effectively. And so hopefully by the next census, we'll have another term instead of hard to count.
Okay, great. Thank you, Janine. With that, we will be going to questions shortly. I would like to ask any of our panelists before we turn to questions, and I'd ask if everyone tuning in right now, if you have a question, please put it in your chat box so you can interact and we can get your questions answered by our panelists. So to all of you, sort of as you see it on the ground, and perhaps we can start with Mr. Fontenot. You mentioned some of the sort of cautionary measures you all are taking to ensure you can increase the count, and that you've been focusing on sort of response rates or at least trends for now in big cities with regard to the Black community. What are you still seeing as existing challenges, even accounting for some of the efforts you're taking? And then to the rest of the panel, the same question, particularly for those who don't have internet access, and to some of the comments Janine talked about, when we have these stay-at-home orders and a real fear factor, right, around the current climate. What else can be done in addition to what's being done? So let me turn it over to Albert.
Yeah, one of the things that Dr. Janine mentioned that is very important, and that's the count in rural places that do not have internet connectivity and also don't have traditional mailing. They don't receive mail at their homes or where they live, and that's our Update Leave operation. And she's absolutely right. That's 5 million of the U.S. households and 1.8 million of Puerto Rican households fall in that category. That operation should have actually been conducted March 15th through April 17th. So right about the time the country shut down for COVID-19, we had started to go into the field on that operation and pulled our people out of the field. That operation right now is scheduled for June 13th through July 9th. It has not been canceled. It's just been pushed back to fit the time where we're going to be sending people, feel that it's safe to send people out into the community to drop off packets that enable people to respond online with or without an ID, with a paper form, or by calling in. And so we still intend to make sure we double down on that effort to get that information out to those people. That's an area that we know had major impact when COVID-19 started. And so we're looking at making sure we address that. Another issue that we're looking at, to be sure, is how do we count people who don't have traditional housing, such as those experiencing homelessness, those who are serviced by servicing such as nursing homes and those types of issues. One of the things we're doing right now is trying to work very closely with the local community organizations and stakeholders and outside partners to determine the best way for us to move forward and ensure that we get an accurate count of those populations, who are very difficult to count at best.
Okay, thank you. I want to actually ask Congressman Horsford to chime in here about the sort of low response rates as he's seeing it with regard to the rural districts in your area.
Thank you, Mina. And as Naomi was going through the map of Nevada, so my district covers half the state. It's 52,000 square miles. I have 6 rural counties and then the urban area of Clark County. So of my 6 rural counties, all of them have a very low response rate. And that red that you see there, Nye County, is among the worst, White Pine in yellow. And what is the reason is largely low broadband access and access to the internet and connectivity. Very few community resources to even go to complete the census online. And again, we know right now we're in a stay-at-home order, so that's not even permissive. And so those counties, based on the information that I'm getting at the state level, I mean, we're talking about response rates in the 10, 20, 30% level, which is affecting our overall state response rate. If we were able to increase the rural response, it would substantially increase our overall state response rate. So again, this is where I absolutely agree. We need more targeted resources to underserved areas. I also have a number of tribal communities throughout my district and throughout the state of Nevada. And while they're part of our complete count committee, they still don't have the same access to the internet and other resources to complete the census. So this is, again, something that I think, with all due respect to the census, we need to redouble the effort, especially now with COVID-19, because people aren't going to even be able to access community resources, which makes the job of completing the census that much harder. I know they can do it by phone, but that takes an effort as well. So I completely agree with the analysis that the foundation has put together, and the maps that you have color coordinated by county speak exactly to what it is that I'm seeing here on the ground. Oh, I also wanted to agree with Dr. Mclean about the date. And I know that ultimately this is going to require congressional review and approval. You know, while there may be some good aspects to delaying the self-response, by delaying the reporting of that information to the states, it has a lot of consequences that people need to understand and think through. And we only meet every other year for 120 days. If they don't provide that data to us until July of 2021, that will be after our legislature has adjourned, and there will be no ability, unless the governor calls a special session, for us to conduct the redistricting process in our state to ensure that there's public hearings. I was in the state Senate when we did redistricting in 2011. I was the majority leader of the state Senate. So I know that process very well. And I know how involved it is, how important the public comment period is. All of that helps to build the record for how you determine both congressional and legislative boundaries. And I am very concerned that if we extend these dates out too far, that we're actually going to further quelch the democratic process and affect public input into this process. So those are all issues that we're going to have to evaluate before any final decision.
Well noted, Congressman Horsford. I want to encourage our listeners to please send your questions via the Q&A icon. We have Stephanie Reynolds who has some interest in looking at the map from New York, so we can do that. And I'd also like, while we're going through that, I'd like to ask Janine if you can talk about if we can back up a moment and just talk about the evolution of the census since the debates around the inclusion of the citizenship question, which then got sort of rescinded, the lingering effect of that fear factor, combined with the fact that there's a general election happening, the adjustments that are being taken, right, to just be in the know, but also keep your families protected. And then, of course, the alarmingly high rates we're seeing of disproportionate infections and deaths of Black people from COVID-19. You know, what can we do on the ground? What is the reality when it comes to, you know, who's thinking about the census, right? I mean, people are trying to stay alive. And then for those who are actually trying to get access to fill out the census, again, we're just a lot of roadblocks here, but part of the work you're doing is to sort of overcome that. But what can we learn from the past sort of couple years of actually mobilizing to get to this place? Well, what would you say about sort of the interest on part of folks across the country and households to fill this out and know that it's just this important to do?
Yeah, one of the things I mentioned before that we had a really large, pretty large ad buy of almost $1 million. That was for television, radio, press, and digital. But, you know, and the idea that when the first delays about the census started coming out was that, oh, while we're all social distancing, we have a captive audience. And that, hey, let's play everything on TV, let's do, you know, but working with our media companies, we found, you know, a couple of weeks into it that the television, you know, wasn't working as well as digital. And so we pivoted to doing a lot more digital because people are more on their phones and their tablets and, you know, trying to figure out what's going on versus watching TV, or they're watching Netflix and streaming stuff all day and not getting these commercials. And so being aware of that, and also being aware that people are struggling, people are hurting. You know, I have lots of friends who are in fields where they cannot work, you know, hairdressers and DJs, and, you know, and then where they really just cannot do any more work. And then I also have friends who are on the front lines, my friends who are still working at the CDC that are essential staff, my friends who are nurses and doctors who are putting their lives at risk every day. And so, yes, the census is important. It is vitally important to our future, to the future of, you know, not just Black folks, but everybody. But we also have to be cognizant of the fact that people are really, really hurting right now, and to do as much as we can to help. You know, one of the things that we're working on here in Georgia, schools have been canceled for the rest of the year. And there are students who aren't there, you know, they only get their meals from, you know, from school. And so we are, you know, we're trying to work with school systems to get out messaging and to also help with deliveries. So there's just all kinds of things that you can do and that organizations across the country are doing to try and get messaging out about the census while also helping out in their communities. The other question that you asked was about outreach, and Congressman Horsford hit it right on the head. These communities, these rural communities where they do not have access to internet, one thing that we are trying, you know, we have a staff of field organizers that were on the ground and talking to people and doing one-on-ones, but they're not doing that now. But what are they doing? They're doing traditional methods of organizing. They are phone banking. They are text banking. We are doing a letter to the editor program so that we can get the message out through local newspapers about how important the census is and how it will impact their communities. And so we encourage those of you who have time to volunteer to phone bank for organizations around the country to help them really get out that message. And then the first thing that you asked was about the citizenship question. This question was put, or is not on the census. That's the first thing. A couple of weeks before the census even started, a survey was done that found that I think it was somewhere around 70% of people surveyed thought that the citizenship question was going to be on the census. There is no citizenship question on the census. We do know that that question was put there to discourage people from participating in the census. The origin of it, long story short, is that there was a GOP strategist that did a study that found if you use citizenship data to redraw districts during the redistricting process, that it would benefit the GOP and non-Hispanic white populations to the detriment of populations of color in terms of the distribution of political power. And so that question, luckily, was struck down by the Supreme Court, but it still worked to put a lot of fear in immigrant communities. And I want to point people in the direction of a wonderful group that we have also been happy to call our partners, which is the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, or BAJI. BAJI works with, when we talk about immigrant issues, Black immigrants are often left out of the conversation. But what we know, Nana Jamfi, who is the head of BAJI, did a wonderful Facebook Live the other day, talking about the fact that a lot of our Black immigrant brothers and sisters are the ones who were doing these at-risk jobs. When we talk about the meat packing plants that are being shut down because of COVID-19 infections running rampant through them, a lot of those are Black people and Black immigrants that are working in those areas, and a lot of other industries that are still deemed essential are putting, our Black immigrant and our Black folks in general at risk. And then as far as your question about the health disparities, Black people if you look at the numbers, they're in communities, there is a disproportionate number of Black people who are being infected and dying from COVID-19. Mm-hmm. This is because there are and have been health disparities in the Black community that have a lot to do with the resources that our communities get, in addition to the fact that Black people are treated differently when they go into the hospital, when they do get there. And so we need to be aware of that. Mm-hmm. And by participating in the census, okay, yes, let's bring it all back.
Thank you, Janine.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. Go. I appreciate it. We are at a close here. If you all viewers, if you can hold on for a moment, we're gonna close out here. But we did get one question about social distancing from Facebook Live, and that there have been concerns about hackers on different online platforms, and how are we addressing some of those security concerns. This is from Caroline Jules on Facebook Live. If we could ask maybe Mr. Fontenot very quickly, if you could give us your 30-second response around concerns on online platforms, given the addition of that option to fill out the census. Albert?
Yes, we have worked with all the government agencies that are the top security agencies to ensure that our data is encrypted from the time a person enters it into their device until it comes into our process and we process the data. So we have the top security protocols in place used by private industry and government to ensure that their data is safe.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you so much. The hour went by quite quickly. I want to sincerely thank Congressman Horsford and the great work he's doing, and for joining us, Dr. Janine Abrams Mclean, of course, on our team, Naomi Smith, and all of our viewers, Mr. Albert Fontenot, who is on the front lines at the census doing this work. Thank you to all the viewers. This is the first of 6 part virtual brain trust series. The next series that will be happening will take place on April 30th with regard to the economic stimulus package. COVID-19 and Black America. You can see the flyer here. We'll be joined by Congresswoman Terry Sewell Dr. Derek Hamilton, Andre Perry, Dr. Julianne Malveaux. Please join us. You can see the register link, cbcfinc.org/, that's the webinar to register. You can find information at our homepage, cbcfinc.org. Thank you for all the work. Please find our maps for instant data access and join our listserv. We appreciate you joining us today. We have one polling question for you before we wrap up here. And if all of you can take a moment to fill it out on your screens, we want to make sure that we are on the cusp of reaching out. And so if you can tell us about your understanding of the census's impact from today's discussion. We hope you found the information helpful. If you can please fill that out while we wrap up. Again, thank you to our panelists, and we look forward to all of you joining us on April 30th. So take care from the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you all. Okay, I believe everyone filled out the polling question and we'll be logging out now. Thank you so much.